But listen closely, for the Skald has raised his voice once more, like thunder reverberating across the horizon. It is not merely what has come to pass that matters, but also what lies ahead. Conrad's path is not just a series of battles and triumphs. It led him across uncharted seas, through clashes with destiny itself, revealing sights privy to only a select few. For his choosing was no accident, but the will of forces beyond our comprehension. And on this path, Ragnarök awaits him, the final battle of gods and monsters, a harbinger of a new beginning. The Skald fell silent, as if weighing each word, his gaze fixed on the campfire's flames, as though he himself were a shadow of the past, guarding Conrad's secrets. Ragnarök is a storm bearing down upon us, from which there is no escape. At its very epicenter is the wolf Fenrir, son of Loki, ready to tear open the heavens and devour the sun. He is not merely a shadow, but a primordial force, forged in the depths of time, his eyes burning with the promise of the end. The Skald's gaze swept over his listeners, as if holding a secret known only to a select few. But Conrad, the chosen one, was unprepared for the looming events. He followed Fenrir's tracks like a wolf on the scent of prey, until he reached a place where the world seemed to lose its balance. His home village, the place where he grew up, lay in ruins, consumed by an incomprehensible force. Gigantic paw prints like craters scarred the path of destruction. Fenrir was among us, and Conrad realized that the battle would be fought not only with swords and axes. No, the true battle would be far more complex, and the wolf was but one of the monsters threatening to engulf the world. The Skald chuckled with a hint of bitterness and continued, having lost Fenrir, his trail, Conrad turned to the gods, to the ancient spirits who had guided warriors before him. His prayer, as fragile as a leaf in the wind, was a plea for help. But who could aid one destined to face the end of times? Who, save Odin himself, the All-Father, could imbue him with strength for what was to come? He set his cup of mead on the ground and gazed into the flames, as if seeing them burn in a peculiar way. And so, as the wind carried his thoughts away, Conrad found what he sought, a fishing village by the sea. It held no grandeur, just simple folk toiling for sustenance. Yet even the humblest villages have their stories. Arriving there, he breathed in the scent of the sea and the sound of waves, creating a deceptive calm, a fleeting peace. But an unease hung in the air, as if the wind, an ancient messenger of the gods, had brought something more. The mariner. The Skald paused, as if lost in the memories of that night. He leaned forward, as if his next word held a secret of immense importance. The mariner was unlike any other. His eyes, deep as a stormy sea, had witnessed too many battles. He looked at Conrad and, without a word, understood that the warrior was marked by something greater than death. He watched him like a predator watches its prey, but instead of suspicion, the mariner offered something different, a proposition. The Skald chuckled, as if witnessing the scene unfold. The proposition was simple, yet it carried the weight of the gods. Will. The mariner, his voice deep as thunder, told Conrad of the necessity to travel to the 9 worlds and warn the kings of Ragnarök's onset that Fenrir, the beast of destruction, was free, and there was no time to delay. The mariner knew the journey would be long, and the lands Conrad would traverse teemed with unimaginable horrors. But the call was clear, and the future of the world rested on the young Viking's shoulders. The Skald fell silent, his gaze distant, as if he envisioned what transpired in each kingdom. Conrad, with the courage of a true son of Odin, accepted the challenge. He knew there was no turning back, that his path lay through seas, mountains, and kingdoms where warring kings understood the threat but could not act. He knew that every warning, every soul touched by the warrior, his word, could alter the world's fate. and the mariner on a black-sailed longship guided him to the first kingdom. There, his true journey was to begin, and Conrad's path, that of the chosen one, would be etched in the stars. The skald raised his cup and, with a mysterious smile, looked at his listeners, engrossed in the story. The fire crackled, and the wind blew ever stronger, as if it too were part of this grand legend. And the skald began to tell of the first kingdom Conrad saw. The winds fiercely cleaved the sea, and the black-sailed longship, like a massive beast, cut through the icy waters. Conrad's journey, accompanied by the mysterious mariner, had only just begun. The sea seemed boundless, as if the world stretched to the end of times. The mariner, silent, gazed at the horizon, the thin line between water and sky. No words passed between him and Conrad. The young warrior knew the path would be long and arduous, and the mariner seemed to understand this. Time was relentless, and the storm around them grew ever stronger. The mariner, with snowy white hair and a beard concealing more secrets than Conrad could fathom, exuded ancient wisdom. His gaze never left the horizon, as if he awaited the opportune moment to speak. He moved with the precision of a man accustomed to great voyages, yet he radiated mystery. The old mariner was not merely a warrior. He was a man of the waters, winds, and stars. He knew the seas like no other, and his presence was akin to that of an ancient spirit, guiding Conrad toward a future beyond any mortal's comprehension. So, as the longship's black sails swelled in the wind, and the sound of waves crashing against the hull filled the silence, Conrad could not help but feel a connection to the mariner. He had not been chosen without reason. The sense of being part of something larger was palpable. But what exactly did this role entail? He knew his journey was not merely about vanquishing foes or conquering territories. It was beyond anything he had ever experienced. He had been chosen, but for what? Questions in his mind were as numerous as stars in the sky. But the mariner offered no answers. The old man, without a doubt, knew that Conrad would discover everything in his own time. Days stretched endlessly, like a prolonged polar night, and the vastness of the sea reflected the oppressive weight of fate hanging over the two companions. During brief stops for provisions, the seasoned mariner was a man of few words, but each one resonated like a saving beacon, piercing the impenetrable darkness. "There is no greater honor, Conrad, than to follow your destined path," he declared on one starless evening as the piercing wind howled. "We are but pawns in the hands of ruthless gods, and when the storm breaks, it does not ask for our consent. It simply consumes us, whether we wish it or not." Conrad eagerly absorbed every word, realizing that his journey was not only a physical trial, but also a spiritual rebirth. The mariner was not merely a guide, but an embodiment of unyielding will, a man who had already endured the harsh trials that Conrad was yet to face. As they pressed onward, the waters grew increasingly turbulent, and Fenrir's ominous presence seemed to hover in the air like an unrelenting shadow. The imperturbable old mariner confidently steered his longship through the raging waves, as if sensing the approaching storm. Finally, after long days of wandering, the black-sailed longship reached the shores of the First Kingdom. The wind still raged, and the sky was shrouded in leaden clouds, as if the gods themselves were intently observing the events. The mariner, without hesitation, steered the ship to the shore, where the land appeared scorched and unwelcoming. Conrad was the first to step onto solid ground, feeling the alien soil beneath his feet. The scent of the earth was unfamiliar, salty and heavy. He surveyed the boundless field, on the horizon of which rose the impregnable walls of the kingdom. This was not at all what he expected to see. A cyclopean structure imbued with an atmosphere of oppression, as if unseen forces watched his every move. The city's heavy gates were tightly shut, and muffled sounds of footsteps emanated from within the walls. This place did not radiate hospitality, rather it exuded constant tension. Conrad felt a chilling shiver run down his spine as he gazed at the impregnable fortress. The mariner, without a word, led him to the gates, which slowly opened, revealing an inner courtyard that seemed permeated by 1,000 invisible eyes. Inside the majestic hall, a king sat on an iron throne, inspiring awe with his formidable appearance. His thick beard and grizzled hair revealed him to be a seasoned warrior who had endured countless battles. In the depths of his eyes, a certain predetermination was visible, as if he already knew of the impending events but could not prevent them. Conrad moved forward, feeling the weight of his mission increase with each step. As he approached the king, he felt his piercing gaze, as if the monarch sought to penetrate his very soul. "Are you the one who came to warn of Ragnarök?" The king, his voice boomed, echoing off the stone walls of the hall. An icy cold permeated the chamber, and the ensuing silence was so dense it felt physically palpable. Conrad knelt before the king, realizing the gravity of the moment, yet understanding that it would be no easy task. Convincing the king that the end of the world was inevitable was not simple. "Yes, my liege. Ragnarök is relentlessly approaching, and Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, is already tearing the heavens with his sharp fangs. We cannot lose a moment. The demise of all existence is at our doorstep," Conrad declared in a firm voice, though doubt swelled within him. How could he convince a man who had dedicated his entire life to defending his lands from invaders that the end of the world was imminent and that he should act immediately? The king cast a cold gaze upon him, and for a moment all stood frozen in tense anticipation. The silence became almost unbearable. "Do you truly believe what you say, warrior?" the king asked in an icy tone. "You have come to me with these grim prophecies, but do you not see that peace reigns in the kingdom? Do you not see that our lands prosper?" "How can I believe in the reality of Ragnarök?" Conrad remained silent, feeling the pressure mount with each passing second. The king was right in his doubts. How could one believe such a terrifying and incredible story without any proof? But Conrad, his gaze remained unwavering. He knew what was coming. He knew what was at hand. Suddenly, the king slowly rose from his throne and approached a nearby table. He picked up a long, thin sword, its blade engraved with ancient runes. Holding it before Conrad, the king compelled the warrior to an involuntary respect. This was a royal sword, forged for the bloody wars of bygone eras. "What you ask, warrior, is no trifle. One cannot simply declare the end of the world without good reason. But if you truly believe your words, and if this is your destiny, then take this sword. Raise it before my subjects and prove that you are authorized to act on behalf of the kingdom. Use it to pass through the barracks and cities, warning the people of the impending doom." Conrad accepted the sword, feeling the burden of the world's fate settle upon his shoulders. He understood that the path would be long and fraught with dangers, but as he raised the sword before his allies, he realized he was empowered to act, that with this sword he would fight for the survival of all living beings. The king silently watched Conrad depart, holding the royal sword and ready for his mission. Conrad's destiny was finally sealed. Clutching the royal sword, feeling the weight of destiny, Conrad left the gates of the majestic city. His heart was filled with resolve, yet his mind was plagued by questions and doubts. The vast domains of the kingdom stretched into the distance, and he realized that his mission brooked no delay. Ragnarök would not wait, and the wolf Fenrir drew closer with every passing minute. His task was clear: to carry the tidings to every corner of the kingdom, to visit barracks, settlements, and forgotten lands, to ensure that all were prepared for the impending catastrophe. The royal sword rested at his hip, and with each step, the runes engraved on its blade emitted a faint glow, as if confirming the authority bestowed upon him. Conrad was no longer a mere warrior. Now he was a messenger of an inescapable fate. The first days of his wanderings were marked by solitude. He traversed icy fields and dense forests. A white blanket covered the land, and the wind bit at his skin like a dagger's blade. Profound loneliness accompanied him on his journey, but Conrad did not let it break him. The weight of his mission compelled him onward. He understood that if he failed, doom awaited all. Fear of the unknown tormented him, but resolve gave him strength. Conrad understood that the first order of business was to reach the nearest barracks, where the kingdom's warriors and officers were stationed. Along the way, he encountered humble villages with wooden houses and thatched roofs. The people were simple, but on every face, he saw traces of war, dulled gazes, signs of weariness and fear. The shadow of war hung over all, but no one suspected that the true end was already nigh. In every village he visited, the same scene repeated. People knew of external threats, invasions, and raids on the kingdom's borders. But no one spoke of Ragnarök. The idea of a global catastrophe, an apocalypse that would affect the gods themselves, seemed a distant legend, something that would never happen. However, Conrad knew he could not rest until everyone, even the most isolated inhabitant of every village and barracks, had been warned. In the barracks, where soldiers were in constant readiness for battle, the reaction to Conrad was different. The commanders of each post, after hearing his warning, looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and skepticism. How could a simple warrior bring such tidings? How could such a young man with an unknown past speak of Ragnarök? But Conrad's sword, with the royal runes engraved upon it, spoke louder than any words. Nevertheless, each warning was given with difficulty. He was not immediately accepted. In every barracks, he encountered stern glances, questions, and distrust. Even at the sight of the royal sword, most officers doubted the seriousness of his words. Some laughed, others merely shook their heads, considering him mad. But Conrad was unyielding. He knew he spoke the truth and was ready to fight for it. It was in one of the villages, on the path between barracks, that Conrad fought his first true battle. Entering a small, secluded settlement, he sensed something was amiss. The air carried the scent of ash and smoke, and in the distance, cries filled with terror could be heard. Reaching the central square, he saw a band of marauders plundering the village, his storerooms. The brigands were well armed, but not experienced warriors. They were ordinary people, seeking profit, devoid of honor and respect for life. Noticing Conrad in his snow-covered armor and with the shining royal sword at his hip, the leader of the thieves sneered contemptuously. "You, a mere warrior, think you can stop us?" the leader shouted, brandishing a rusty sword. "This is the end of your path, friend. No one will stand between us and our spoils." Conrad did not utter a word. He had fought monsters far worse than these men. With one swift motion, he drew his sword and charged forward. The sound of the blade cutting through the air echoed across the square. He had not come here to kill indiscriminately, but to protect the innocent. Every one of his strikes was precise, effective, but with a hint of mercy. The fight was brief. Moments later, the brigands lay on the ground, disarmed and defeated. After the skirmish, Conrad approached the leader of the thieves, who had not yet lost consciousness and was bound. "Tell the others," Conrad said in an icy tone, "that the world is on the brink of ruin. Ragnarök approaches, and our own demise will be the last spoils." The leader looked at Conrad in horror, words trembling on his lips. He understood that against such a great destiny, there was no standing. Conrad left the brigands tied and continued on his way. He knew that the trials were not over, but whatever lay ahead, he had to reach the other kingdoms. Meanwhile, he felt the burden of responsibility grow heavier with each step. Conrad continued his journey, now even more urgent than before. In the villages, barracks, and watchtowers, There was increasing talk of growing unrest, but doubts still lingered in the air. People listened with fear but did not grasp the scale of the impending catastrophe. Finally, reaching the last city of the kingdom, he was exhausted but resolute. He found the authorities. The council of elders and generals gathered to discuss the impending war with neighboring peoples. But the news Conrad had to deliver concerned not a simple war, but the end of the world. With a war cry that shook the air, he brandished his sword, proclaiming, "Kings, warlords, common folk, Ragnarök is at the threshold. Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, has broken free from celestial chains. The end is near, and everyone must prepare for the inevitable." A deafening silence fell over the hall. Conrad's blade, like a beacon, illuminated the space, and the clang of steel echoed in the minds of all present. The generals and advisors, stunned by what they heard, could not deny the truth of Conrad's words. After much deliberation, Conrad finally received the highest authorization to continue his vital mission. Weapon in hand, he raised it before his allies, like a banner of the truth he carried. He was now granted the right to travel through military camps, cities, and settlements, warning everyone of the coming catastrophe. His path was far from over, but he felt the power of the royal sword and, with it, the burden of saving the world. Conrad returned to the mariner, his shoulders stooped under the weight of his new burden. Each kingdom that heard his words, each soul touched by his speech, brought him closer to the destiny ordained by the gods. The royal sword, as if alive, radiated the power of the authority granted, and Conrad understood that despite his warrior's calling, this mission transcended all battles he had ever fought. It was no longer about conquering territories or annihilating enemies, but about preserving life on Earth in the face of the greatest threat the gods had ever known. Ragnarök. The mariner, patiently waiting on the shore where the long ship swayed, met Conrad with a gaze filled with approval and concern. He understood that Conrad's wanderings were only just beginning, and the young warrior would face many trials. The mariner, as always, remained mysterious, but his presence now was more crucial than ever. He was Conrad as his guide, and both knew that many difficulties lay ahead. "The kingdoms have heeded your words, Conrad," the mariner said, his voice muffled and serious, as if sharing ancient secrets. "But time is almost gone. Fenrir gains strength with every passing moment, and the destruction he brings is beyond description. Each kingdom visited, each battle won, that is a step toward salvation from the coming chaos." Conrad nodded, realizing the full weight of the task laid upon him. With the royal sword at his hip and a heart full of resolve, he boarded the longship, ready to visit the 7 kingdoms under the oppressive power of primordial Fenrir. Conrad's first destination was Jotunheim, the land of the giants, a harsh and wild realm where the elements reigned supreme. The sea leading there was turbulent, waves furiously beating against the hull as if trying to push them back, but the mariner, with his expertise, confidently guided the longship through the raging storm. Jotunheim struck them with its grim beauty. Ice and stone giants dwelled in majestic castles carved into the rocks. An ancient tension permeated the air, as if every stone and every tree bore witness to the approaching end of the world. Conrad was met by the leader of the giants, a mighty being with gray skin and eyes sparkling like diamonds. Despite his formidable appearance, the giant listened attentively to Conrad's words. "Ragnarök, you say?" the giant rumbled, his voice shaking the earth. "The gods have lost control over destiny. The giants always knew that the end was inevitable, but we are not to blame for it. The key to salvation is Fenrir." After difficult negotiations, during which the giant granted Conrad passage through his lands, he was allowed to carry his message throughout Jotunheim, but the surrounding atmosphere was bleak and hopeless. Conrad felt the weight of the impending doom, for even the giants seemed on the verge of despair. Leaving Jotunheim, Conrad headed to Alfheim, the abode of the elves, renowned for their mastery of magic and control over light. The sea calmed and the sky shone azure as they reached Alfheim's shores. The elven cities amazed with their ethereal architecture and gardens full of exotic plants. But beneath this beauty lay a premonition of disaster. The elves, known for their connection to mystical forces, sensed the approaching danger. The elven leader, a being with silver hair and radiant eyes, met Conrad with a serious expression. "You are right to warn us, warrior," he said. "The war of the gods is inevitable. Fenrir, the wolf, is just the beginning. But what can we oppose to the end of times?" In Alfheim, Conrad had to undergo a series of trials. First, the elves subjected him to magical tests to ensure his loyalty and true intentions. He honorably endured all the trials, proving his strength of spirit and unwavering resolve. In the end, the elven leader presented him with a magical amulet, a symbol of their faith, and Conrad set off, knowing that the elves would do everything possible to help, even if their powers were limited. Vanaheim, the realm of the Vanir, was home to the gods of fertility and wisdom. Unlike other worlds, Vanaheim was a land of abundance, where fields were always green and harvests rich. The journey to Vanaheim was peaceful, and Conrad felt a sense of tranquility upon entering this blessed land. However, upon arrival, he discovered that the Council of Vanir gods was divided. Some insisted on immediate action against Ragnarök, while others were skeptical. The leader of Vanaheim, a goddess with golden skin and hair the color of lush green, explained to Conrad that the Vanir's power was weakened and they had lost much of their former might. Ragnarök, which was meant to be a battle of all gods, now seemed an insurmountable task for any single world. Nevertheless, Conrad managed to persuade the Vanir to join the resistance, and with their support, he set off with greater confidence to the next realms. Conrad's journeys through other worlds became a severe test of his spirit and body. In Svartalfheim, the abode of the Dark Elves, he experienced the bitterness of betrayal and engaged in unseen battles, desperately trying to make his voice heard by the rulers of that grim realm. In Niflheim, where eternal cold reigns, he had to battle legions of undead, displaying wonders of skill and tactical acumen. Muspelheim, engulfed in unquenchable flames and inhabited by fiery monsters, became one of the most dangerous stages of his odyssey. But Conrad, unflinching, engaged its inhabitants in combat. As the hero advanced, Fenrir grew relentlessly, and the ominous portents of Ragnarök became ever more apparent. The monstrous wolf already roared beyond the heavens, and the earth trembled with its might. Conrad felt its approach and understood that time was running out. Having traversed 8 worlds, Conrad managed to secure support, but victory was still far off. Fateful Ragnarök still loomed on the horizon, and Fenrir grew stronger. Conrad realized that the next trials would be even more brutal, but his resolve remained unshaken. The royal sword, a symbol of his authority, never left his hand, and the confidence gained in the 7 realms guided his way. Before heading to Asgard, the abode of the gods, Conrad made a final stop in the lands connecting the smaller kingdoms with the great ones. He contemplated the boundless expanses and distant heavens, where the stars seemed to shine especially brightly, as if anticipating the coming events. The mariner, who had invariably accompanied him on his travels, looked at him with a serious expression. "You are ready, Conrad," he said. "The world stands on the brink of ruin, but it is within your power to change what is foretold. Do not stop. Keep fighting." Heeding these words, Conrad pressed on, understanding that his journey was far from over. Ragnarök was closer than ever, but now he had become the chosen one, the warrior destined to lead the realms toward the end of times. The Skald rose, as if bearing the weight of ages, and all eyes turned to him. The night his silence was broken only by the crackling of the fire, whose flames flickered as if listening to every word of the storyteller. The rustling wind, the whispering leaves, and the murmur of the trees seemed to merge into a single melody, creating an atmosphere of enchantment. The skald, holding an empty cup, leaned forward, and the firelight illuminated his face, lending his gaze a mysterious glow. But listen, my friends. The skald began, lowering his voice and giving it a serious tone. He paused, and the silence became almost palpable. Everyone held their breath, awaiting the continuation of the story. Conrad's journey, it seemed, had become even more inevitable. Conrad, the warrior chosen by Odin himself, did not falter. With the royal sword in hand, he pierced through worlds, battling monsters born of nightmares. He warned kings, warriors, and everyone he met. Ragnarök approaches, and Fenrir is already tearing the heavens. The skald paused again, as if weighing each word. He knew, as did all present, that the end was not just a legend. The end was very real and had already crept upon them. The wolf, son of Loki, was growing by the hour, and the earth trembled with his might. But Conrad did not waver, did not retreat. He carried the message of the gods. The skald raised his cup, his gaze filled with contemplation. But now, my friends, Conrad's path must change. He has passed through desolate lands, battled forces of darkness, and warned all realms. But the last world he must reach, the greatest of all, that, my friends, is what fate itself has ordained for him. He took a sip of mead as if tasting the story. His last breath mingled with the nectar of the gods. The sound of mead pouring into the cup echoed in the night, heavy with the premonition of coming events. Conrad knew that to complete his mission, he would have to venture beyond known worlds, where no mortal foot had ever trod. For he knew that somewhere in the starlands, in the abode of the gods, a city rose, a city where time and space merged, a city that watched over the world below, where the fate of kings and gods was decided. The skald fell silent once more. His eyes narrowed, as if he saw what was hidden from ordinary sight. But what awaits him there, my friends? What do the gods truly want from a mere mortal? The skald leaned back, and the firelight illuminated his face. The atmosphere around him seemed to thicken, becoming more tense. The crackling of the fire grew louder, and the wind, sweeping through the trees, seemed to carry a distant message. Conrad was about to enter a place some call the heart of the world. He did not know what awaited him, but he understood that he had been chosen for something greater than he could have imagined. The place he was heading, where gods walked among mortals, was beyond all dreams and legends. The skald raised his cup again, his eyes shining with the fire of the story. And there, my friends, Conrad will find his true destiny. For the gates of that realm open only to the chosen. And what will he do when he stands before gods with the power to destroy all we hold dear? Of that, my friends, we shall learn on the morrow. With a sly smile, the bard settled back into his seat. The sound of nectar falling from the cup, like dancing flames, seemed to linger in anticipation of the story's continuation. And for now, my faithful companions, may the warmth of the hearth and the freshness of the free wind be with you. And remember, Judgment Day is near, and the one on whom Odin places his hopes has not yet finished his journey.